Prime Minister Modi's 3.0's first budget has been tabled by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. In a bid to achieve the $5 trillion economy target, the government has identified 9 key priority areas. One of them is promoting skilled employment in the country. The budget has envisaged creating 3 crore new jobs to bolster the economy. To realize this, rupees 2 lakh crores have been outlaid by the centre as well. Schemes to enhance skilling opportunities, provide incentives for freshers, support employers and facilitate job creation in manufacturing in particular have been also announced. Apart from this, an ambitious internship plan has also been undertaken. The centre will launch a comprehensive scheme for providing internship opportunities in 500 top companies to 1 crore youth in the next 5 years. Well, the primary objective of this exercise is to provide 12 months exposure to interns to a business environment. Additionally, an internship allowance of rupees 5,000 per month will also be given, along with a one-time assistance of rupees 6,000 rupees will be provided. Companies will be expected to bear the training cost and 10% of the internship cost from their CSR funds. Finance Minister Sitharaman has specified that youth aged between 21 and 24 who are not employed and not engaged in full-time education will be eligible to apply. We know what internships are. They are temporary work experiences offered by organizations, usually on a short-term basis, lasting from a few months to a year. These help students gain experience in a specific industry and provide an opportunity to acquire practical skills. Internships give clarity to industry dynamics and enable recent graduates to build their professional portfolio by helping them augment their network as well. Over the last few years, there have been concerted efforts from the government to make the vocational education and skill development ecosystem more effective across all the key segments like schools, IITs and private training institutes as well. Pre-vocational and vocational courses have also been introduced at schools, and the integration of vocational education in higher education is already a strategic initiative by the government. These efforts across education value chain are aligned with the National Education Policy 2020 guidelines as well. The government's thrust in this budget on polishing the skills of students and recent graduates via internships is likely to continue to focus on the last mile efforts to upscale the quality of our workforce. Well, that was perhaps one of the key areas where this budget focused on. We're going to talk about a number of other issues with our guest joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Sandeep Chachra, Executive Director of ActionAid Association, with us on the show. Mr. Deepak Wadhwa, a business guru, also joins us on the program. Vandana Vijay, founder and CEO of Offbeat Tracks, also with us on the program. Thank you everyone for taking out the time and speaking with us. Mr. Chachra, if I can begin with you. Well, you have been a crusader when it comes to skill development. You have often highlighted that the unemployment conundrum that India faces at this point in time has to rise up from the ground level. Do you think that this initiative has that propensity to change things around perhaps in the next 5 years? Because the number one complaint when it comes to the budget, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to other challenges in our country, are often grounded in the unemployment situation. Is this initiative going to help that? Mr. Chachra.
Thank you, Vinitji, for having me here. And let me begin by saying that this budget actually leverages the current, the stable macroeconomic fundamentals that we have, the robust growth we have, the RBI dividends that we have, and it leverages it towards the challenges which are most pressing at this time in our country. I think in that it also responds to the social hopes, which were very well reflected in the very closely fought elections. And not just that, this budget to me, I mean, I'll get into a number of issues, but I'll begin with employment. But having said that, this budget gives a sense, and that's a departure from the previous budget, a sense of, responsiveness, a breadth of vision, and a direction of vision towards Viksit Bharat, and also resonates with what was released yesterday, the Economic Survey of India. So that's where I look at it. Now, the key focus, and I think there are 2 key focus areas in this budget, one of which you highlighted, employment, I'll come to that, and the other is rural India, agriculture, and issues pertaining to our countryside. So first on the employment question, I think the interesting concept here, and I'll also come to the challenges. The interesting concept here, and a welcome concept here, is from productivity-linked incentives. We've de facto introduced the new concept of employment-linked incentives. You counted a range of them. the schemes both for employers and employee in the formal sector to encourage new employment. So things like first time employees with EPFO, 1 month salary, 15,000, incentives to employers and employees for EPFO contributions, reimbursement for employers up to 2 years for the 3,000 per year, apprenticeship. These are some of the things you talked about. Some of the things I need to add which I also welcome, are rental accommodations for industrial workers in a PPP mode, women workers hostels with fresh facilities. So these are all indeed very welcome steps. And I think the trend which this messaging does in this budget is towards formalization of employment through all these mechanisms. And therefore, these are very welcome steps. It addresses the big challenge which the chief economic advisor also indicated in the economic survey yesterday, that India needs to create 78.5 lakh jobs every year up to 2030. So it's a huge challenge. It's a humongous task. And to that end, a directional effort, a focus has been made in this budget. Now, that arises a set of newer issues or challenges, and some things we would have much more hope to see. For instance, we all know that while the budget also speaks of MSMEs and the need for labor intensive industrialization, it recognizes that, but we know there are headwinds. We know there are headwinds of technology shifts, artificial intelligence, which all point to perhaps a future of less labor absorptive industrialization, what I would say a job loss kind of growth. So I think it's a challenge. It's well taken up. The idea of this budget to give incentives to MSMEs, stress funds to MSMEs, credit to MSMEs for investment in machinery for labor intensive industrialization, these are all very welcome. Nevertheless, given that a large majority of our populations are in what is called informal sector, there's a trend to formalization, no doubt, as indicated here, but a large majority, 90% of our workforce, over 90% of our workforce is still in the informal sector. And I think that's a huge issue here, that what is this budget really doing for informal workers? And how do you EPFO registration is only for formal workers. So that mechanism will escape, giving benefits to informal workers. So the question is, what do we have in this budget in substantive sense for the informal sector employees? Elsewhere in the budget, there's a hint that the e-Shram portal will now be converged or linked up with other such social portals. So there will be convergence in that regard. But I think the question is of, direct employment and targeted employment with a focus on informal sector workers. We would have wanted to see in this budget and then that direction of travel, the aspiration of the directive principles of the state policy, the right to work, therefore guaranteeing employment, direct employment to urban workers, to rural workers through the employment assurance or employment guarantee programs. We do not see that reflections. If I look at the rural side, if I look at the MGNREGA budget, which stands at 86,000 crores in this budget outlays, last year was also 86,000 crores. But if I look at the figure before that year, 21-22, that stood at 90,000 crores. So there's actually a decline. And whereas if you see in the job demand, if you look at data on MGNREGA between 2021 and 23-24, MGNREGA delivered 40 crore more work, 40 crore more person days of work, 265 crores in that year and 305 crores in 23-24. So that reflects the kind of demand there is as far as direct jobs are concerned for informal workers. So I think there is a gap, in my view, which we hoped and still hope would be covered in this budget in the direction of job creation. The budget sends the right signals. For example, capex investment up to 3.4% of the GDP will create some jobs in the end. But I think much more is needed with reference to meeting the employment and jobs challenge. That's in the first instance, Vinitji.
Absolutely. Mr. Chacha, we'll come back to you. Vandana, your takeaways from this budget. Of course, there's also a thrust towards travel and tourism, but mainly that's focused on Bihar this time. But from the overall assessment and as an entrepreneur, what do you feel this budget has done for the industry? Of course, the stock market came back after it lost a few points, around 4%. And then, of course, by the end of the day, around 3 p.m., that loss was only about 0.5%. But overall, what have you made out of this budget? And is this a progressive budget which can be called more inclusive than populist?
First of all, thank you, Vineet, for having me over. And, I was going through what travel and tourism has contributed, looking at the data on the economic survey. And if you look at the numbers, post-pandemic, we looked at over 92 lakh foreign tourist arrivals only in 2023, which was a 43.5% year-on-year increase. The World Travel Tourism Council, which is the WTTC, projects that travel and tourism will contribute to almost 21.15 trillion INR to India's GDP in this year. What we are assuming is that 1 in 11 of every job is going to be in the travel and tourism industry. Now, this industry is, when we talk about travel and tourism, it does not only assume that it is just travel, but it is a whole bunch of allied industries which also come into play. You're looking at infrastructure development across the country, spanning rural, urban, and developing areas in terms of hotels, homestays. We are looking, also if you look at terms of employment, what's happening these days is because of artificial intelligence coming in, a whole bunch of jobs which were projected to be in the market are going to be reduced. The economic survey again stated that we're going to look at a decrease in the number of employment from, say, 0.1 to 0.3% because of artificial intelligence coming in. And this is where I feel travel and tourism would be a great game changer, because it is one of the lower skill required employment generating activities. And keeping that in mind, I wish that the government would have focused a little bit more on what travel tourism could do, because if you look at it in terms of generating employment and also the amount of FDI that the industry generates for the economy is phenomenal. There's just been a brief mention of promoting, rural tourism with the circuit corridors coming in, with the Prasad scheme being something which the government is very heavily invested in, and promoting, we're looking at the Vishnupad temple corridor coming in, the Mahabodhi temple corridor coming in, and then looking at Rajgir for the Hindu and Buddhist pilgrimages. There is still so much more to come, and I wish the government had spoken a little bit more about it. Just to brush upon a few areas which I feel have a lot of not quantifiable, but intangible benefits. Something like, say, border tourism. Border tourism in the forward areas of the country, right from, say, Jammu Kashmir, Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh, reinforces our territorial claim on these regions. I wish we had focused a little bit more on that. Rural tourism. With the government focusing so much on infrastructure development in the rural areas, I feel tourism is just an easy byproduct which you could develop and bring about more employment. Statistically, travel and tourism is one of the largest employers of women in, one of the largest sectors which employ maximum number of women. And the government says that women are a key focus area in this budget. I really wish we could have had a little bit more insight into how we would be more gainfully engaging women across these sectors.
Well said, Vandana. This is obviously inputs, and this is feedback that the government definitely has to be open to. Deepak Wadhwa, business guru, also joins us on the broadcast to talk more about this. Mr. Wadhwa, what did you make of this budget? Of course, apart from the long-term capital gains and the short-term capital gains, there were announcements made which were politically significant as well. The continuation of credit to micro, small and medium enterprises that are facing stress at this point in time has also been acknowledged, and multiple headwinds are being faced by this industry. Do you think all of that has been assimilated and acted upon by the government?
Thank you, Vinny. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me here. I would just like to say that I would like to bring to your notice that the positive part of budget is too much than to see the negative part of it. There are small things which needs to be taken care but have not been taken care, as my fellow friends told us. But on the contrary, it is a complete budget. It's a very balanced budget because everyone has been given a cherry on the cake. A small portion of cake has been distributed to all. And I can see Mr. Sandeep laughing. So, because, every part of the society, every part of the people, every segment of the people has been taken care through something or the other. Bihar is given a better package. Andhra is given a much
But a number
better
of states are
package.
complaining. West Bengal is complaining. Some of the other states are complaining that, hey, what about us? Bengal is complaining that there were floods,
Yes,
there was
yes,
destruction. We haven't been given that allocation. What about those states?
Come to that as well. These two states have been given an extra candy, I can say, but others will also get their share because the infra, the cost, the capex that government is going to spend on infra, the government is going to give internship to the unemployed. So that is not particularly for any state, that is for pan India. So when we talk about the growth will be pan India. It's not limited to just these two states or travel or any other segment. As far as travel is concerned, like Vanna said, there is a huge travel going on within the India right now. You go to any spiritual place, there is no space for a person to walk conveniently. So travel is already on the, I will say, on a high at this point of time. In this budget, the person who has been dented at the most is the people who are full-time stock market traders because they are trading in F&O and the STT, which was 0.1% earlier, has now been doubled, almost 100% jump. So that's a major dent. And when you talk about stock market, the major chunk of turnover is coming from F&O segment only. So maybe that this is the step by FM to filter out some people who are not doing good and who are losing money. Because as you know, there is a report wherein 90% of the F&O traders are losing money and only 10% of them are earning. So maybe this is a step to filter out few small investors and small traders in terms of money, I must say. So this is about the trading part of it. But yes, a salaried person who is who is already in 30% slab will get a benefit of 17,500 rupees, which of course is not a very big chunk of money, but collectively, yes, it is a big money for if you see it pan India. So I will say there's a effort done by FM there as well. And moreover, I don't see this budget as a very long term this thing because it's a anyway. FM madam is going to come again on 1st of February. So maybe if there is any correction is needed, then she can always make those correction at that point of time. So I don't see this budget as a foundation or a perfect foundation for the next 5 years. This is just a baby step.
Okay, all right. Okay, let me
February.
let me bring in Mr. Chatra again, first to counter you and second to, of course, address this highlight of the budget. Mr. Chatra, there are 5 schemes that are going to focus on 4.1 crore population of the youth in our country, and it's going to be a 5-year plan, and it's got a budget of around 2 lakh crores, which is quite considerable. There is a comprehensive internship scheme that we're already talking about, in top companies over 5 years that the government is also going to focus on. The employment linked incentive, including 1 month's wage support for first-time employees. I don't know how easy that's going to be in terms of its logistics and its compliances, is also being initiated. Women-specific skilling programs and increased workforce participation is also something that this budget is focused on. Isn't that something to celebrate, or do you think that there are still a few chinks in this armor?
Thank you once again. And I think the first thing I want to say is what I like about the budget. I've said some things before, but I want to reiterate some other things. And what I want to say is that, this budget is definitely oriented towards inclusivity. And I think the message is for our large majorities in agriculture, in rural India, in our working populations, some of which you mentioned here. And I think that's what I like about this budget. Needless to say, as my previous panelist was saying, budgets are year on year. they indicate a direction of travel. So obviously you can't expect a miracle in 1 year. And I think it's steps in the right direction as I see it. Of course, needless to say, many more corrections are needed. I'll give an example of the key focus of this budget beyond employment is rural India. So if you look at allocations towards rural India, 2.66 lakh crores, or for rural development, and 1.52 lakh crores for agriculture and what's called resilience, agriculture productivity and resilience. I think that's really welcome. Very, very interesting new schemes have been announced. 1 crore farmers for natural farming, 10,000 bioreserve centers, the idea of challenge funds for climate resilient agriculture research, the support to agriculture supply chains, which can ease logistics and which can, sort of give greater benefits. The interesting idea of a new cooperative policy, the national cooperative policy, I love it. And I would like to see the substance of it beyond the headlines. But similarly, the focus on farmer producer organizations, the question of digitization of land records, I think these are some of the very, very interesting ideas. Some of these are under rural development, agriculture, and allied activities, and some of them are under the new transformations. But having said it, the question is, some issues have been missed out, and those are real issues on the ground. And I think the budget or the next budget can benefit from inclusion of those. For instance, we have a focus on natural farming. We will push and support 1 crore farmers for natural farming. The question then arises, how do you ensure a mechanism of what is called ecological valuation of their outputs so that they get higher prices, so that produce is recognized and has a surplus value? Similarly, in rural India, in agrarian India, in allied sectors, fisheries, pastoralism, and so on and so forth, people on the ground are facing a huge backlash of what's called climate change. In terms of loss of wages, real loss of wages, in terms of rising expenditures that they have to incur, but also in terms of loss of habitats. So one would have loved to see a line introduced under that in terms of what is loss and damage compensation, climate loss and damage compensation to affected families. So there are these kind of issues. Now, land records, digitization of land records, land use surveys, which are introduced in this budget, are welcome steps. But the real substance of land reforms is land redistribution, and that's missing. What is land redistribution? Giving land to the tillers. There are millions of agricultural workers, landless agricultural workers in our country. There are millions of what is called very, very marginal farmers in our country. So should this budget or should this direction of travel not be looking at land redistribution? That's not a new agenda, but it's a kind of arrested agenda, because that leads to the great social and economic transformation of the countryside. So yes, inputs are flowing. Yes, some people call it's raining in the rural India, but there are some fundamental issues which are missing. Let me go on to another one. Now, the question of all of these agricultural activities, the central question arises, how is the focus going to be on what is called landless workers, marginal farmers? So are they going to be at the center of it? Are the women-led transformation, which the budget talks elsewhere in another section, is it going to be central for this transformation? So how are we looking at promotion of beyond the headlines of women's skills? How are we looking at, actually reforms in the name of women, ownership, property ownership in the name of women? These are fundamental transformation triggers. And I think the budget could do well to incorporate them on and to trigger them on. So these are some of the things which I think need to build up in terms of what could be the correctional paths ahead. Since you say, this is also a feedback mechanism. Many, many things are welcome. Social justice, we need just to point another dimension. Very interesting. The FM talked about social justice as one of the 9 pillars towards Viksit Bharat. So very interesting, inclusivity and social justice. The idea of saturation approach. The idea that the focus on tribals, Dalits, other groups. What I found missing, for instance, is a large chunk of the population, the large chunk of extremely vulnerable population of denotified tribe, nomadic pastoralist tribes. So I think there are things that can always sort of creatively in constructive manner be incorporated and looked at in future. Thank you.
All right. Vandana, in fact, industry insiders have also said that there are concerns related to the travel sector, issues with GST and TCS on outbound travel, which were ignored. But the fact of the matter is that the government is pushing very hard to include as well as thrust the importance of digital education and digital usefulness and usage in travel and tourism as well. And this initiative in terms of educating and getting people to be employed will definitely have overlaps with what the tourism industry and its challenges are.
Absolutely. In fact, just to dwell a little bit about the TCS bit of it, and TCS was rolled out for us in the industry in October, 1st of October last year, and it was absolute chaos because of the lack of cogent communication in terms of, how would we be as service providers impacted in this, the 5% versus the 20%. I would still really wish that there was greater clarity for that. There is an environmental development fee tax of 2%, which is being charged again by the government. They're proposing that, which has been vehemently opposed by all of us in the industry, which it just makes it very uncompetitive for hoteliers because and the whole concept of GST kind of just falls through if you're going to have multiple tax brackets and layers coming in. So I really wish we could get a little more clarity around that. Domestic travel absolutely is booming in the country, as Deepak ji said. In fact, I think we're facing a problem of mass tourism and over-tourism in all our popular destinations. To quote an example, it's impossible to get something even decent in Kashmir at any point of time in the year below 7,000 to 8,000 rupees a night. So I think it would be great if we could look at, decentralizing or removing these hubs of over-tourism and looking at promoting destinations that are not that popular. As all of us know, the Prime Minister is a great influencer in himself, and just one short visit to Lakshadweep. Maybe we'll foresee the Prime Minister making multiple trips to Orissa now, since that's on the government's agenda. And of course, I'm really excited about Orissa coming up as a destination because just in terms of what the state has to offer, biodiversity, Lake Chilika is one of the most diverse ecosystems. Culturally, historically, in terms of religious tourism, there's just so much which is on board. So very, very excited about that. And lastly, Vineet, when you're talking about the whole digital aspect of it, I think there's some very, very interesting things that the government has rolled out in the last couple of years, and I think they will further enhance on that. We're looking at the e-marketplace, which was launched by the government, which was essentially designed to facilitate interaction between tourists and certified tourist facilitators to kind of weed out the touts and the middlemen from the system. So I think they could further double down on that. There is a Nidhi portal which started. It stands as the National Integrated Database of Hospitality Industry. I do not understand the love of this government with abbreviations, and it takes me a long time to note them down too. But this will be very nice to formulate effective strategies for promoting tourism. And the last is the Sathi system, which is a system for assessment, awareness and training of people in the hospitality industry. This aims to prevent further transmission of viruses. They started during the COVID period, but it's kind of still working. And I personally feel, the government has focused a lot on rural tourism and talked a lot about it. We talk about homestays, but being from the industry, I feel like the need of the hour would be if you could start a system where we have effective training for homestay hosts, look at aspects like sanitization, the basics of hospitality, and kind of building this framework wherein we can have all the homestay hosts from across the country come in and share ideas and develop skills collaboratively, because that really lessens the load which is on the hotel industry and also generates alternate supply, which is always welcome.
All right, great points once again, Vandana. In fact, Mr. Vata, it would be unfair to my journalistic career of 20 years if I do not bring in what the opposition has also felt and said about this budget. Of course, let me quote the leader of the opposition at this point in time, Rahul Gandhi, went on to use words like, this is a kursi bachao budget, and what they have done is copy-pasted the manifesto, or rather the manifestos of their previous regimes, and just pasted it onto this budget. They've also said that there is no accountability when it comes to wages, which have been stagnant for the past 6 years, adjusting for inflation, and there is no hint of growth for the poor in this country, which happen to be the predominant chunk of the population. How do you respond to this criticism, this admonishment, this rebuke by the opposition?
This seems to be a little bit political, issue, but still I would like to comment that whatever Mr. Modi or whatever NDA may do, though, I mean, I'm not finding the word, even the best of the budgets, opposition will say that there is something missing out. So opposition is actually meant to oppose things, and they are doing their job in a very good way. Secondly, I think, as I said previously also, this seems to be a very balanced budget. There are certain new things coming on the way. India is on the growth story, and I think this regime will continue for next 10 to 15 years, because whatever foundations we are laying today will result after a decade or so. Everything that we see around us is a demonstration of good technology and a growth story. Like I am talking to you over this thing is a subject of growth and, better infra between two of us. So I don't see that there is any, India is going to stop. It's unstoppable for at least next 1 decade. And whatever opposition is saying, they are actually meant to say that, and I have no comments for them.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.